To answer the question, are insects intelligent? You first have to define intelligence, because the feats of which insects are capable often mimic the intelligence of higher cognition creatures, but they do so superficially. It's in fact a distinct lack of intelligence which has granted many insects and arachnids their most cognitively impressive feats. One thing to remember, however, arthropods behave more like calculators or computer programs than fully generalized consciousness, meaning their behaviors, even when appearing to be sophisticated, are actually just rote mechanisms, pre-programmed with sometimes very basic and minimal memory and planning. But even traits like these lack comprehension in insects, beyond a basic goal, such as hunt for food or find a mate. To illustrate this idea, this episode will look at 5 extraordinary examples of these feats, and then explain how they relate to both instinct and intelligence. Let's dive in. Leaf mimicking stick insects. The stick insect is one of the most complicated insects in terms of biological design. These guys can fine-tune and change their appearance even across life stages as they molt, and have a bag of tricks to deter predators. But mentally, these are extraordinarily simple animals. They have little in the way of memory, not really any pattern recognition, and can only really respond to stimuli that is immediate and apparent. How then did they become such masters of disguise, able to fool other animals and even themselves sometimes? The answer is they have a brilliantly coded DNA structure. These guys have extremely big genomes. This isn't unheard of among insects. Indeed, some grasshoppers have very large genomes. But the difference is that the stick insect's genome is both large and full of useful or semi-useful backups and copied genes. Large genomes can have several evolutionary benefits, but large genomes with many useful instead of junk sequences can serve developmental and regulatory purposes, which is more important for an insect that relies on morphologically or behaviorally precise traits, such as the disguise of stick insects. But what does this mean? Well, basically, it means that the stick insect has an enormous biological insurance portfolio, or in other words, they've retained many of the traits that they've had in their evolutionary history as a sort of backup system. In addition, having such a massive genome allows for more mutation and the chance of mutation across individual members of the species, meaning that every single stick insect can be a slightly different morph, just based on the random chance of mutation, making each and every stick insect a little bit different, thus mimicking the actual imperfections found in nature. Overall, this is a brilliant strategy, to be sure, but one that benefits more from a lack of comprehension from all parties involved. A study for these stick insects and the other insects that will be talked about in this video will be linked in the description below. The next example is the dung beetle. These insects have been proven to be able to recognize the positioning of stars in the night sky and use it to orient themselves into the direction they want to go in. Their goal is to roll their dung ball in as straight a line as possible to get away from the existing dung pile so that their dung balls won't be stolen by other dung beetles. They can use the sun, the moon, and the stars to do this, and most interestingly, the Milky Way. Perhaps this is why the ancient Egyptians believed that their god Khepri was responsible for pushing the sun across the sky every day. Perhaps they were observant enough to notice that these humble creatures actually did have a natural connection to celestial objects. But what is actually happening here? Well, scientists have shown it's actually as simple as the beetle using their extra-sensitive compound sight to check the strongest, brightest gradient patterns in the sky, and then orient themselves accordingly. Scientists that placed dung beetles in a planetarium were able to get them to change their orientation simply by altering the position of the Milky Way. See, the beetles aren't actually going somewhere specific, just away from the original dung source. The senses of insects show impressive cognitive capability, but not utility. That is, what a sense is able to do versus what they actually use it for. If the beetle were more intelligent, it might select a home first, mark its location, go get the dung ball, and then bring it back to that specific location. But it doesn't do this. It only rolls the dung ball in a straight line away from the original dung pile. It's a behavior that appears sophisticated, but is realistically instinctual and just tuned to their very exclusive interests. Now, what if the behavior of the animal is extraordinarily complex, like that in a spider building its web? Surely there's something more sophisticated going on mentally for them to be able to know how to build a web. But in response, I'll say this. All web building spiders get it right the first time they build one. They don't always build it in the right location, but they absolutely build it correctly in terms of architecture. But just like the dung beetle, this is a rote behavior. It's just a staggeringly complex one. The question remains then, how did it evolve? Well, like everything else, it evolved incrementally and building off previous adaptations. Let's go over 3 of them. The first is the silk, which is the foundation of the web. Silk production predates spiders. Some ancestral arachnids and arachnid relatives, like certain mites, already secreted silk-like proteins for egg production or lining retreats. But in early spiders, silk glands diversified into many different kinds, like dragline, capture, wrapping, and others. This allowed for more complex uses, which showed an incremental process. Initially, silk was just a protective or reproductive tool, but over time, spiders began to use silk to anchor themselves, bridge gaps, and eventually trap prey, using it like a net. This set the stage for organized web structures. The second trait are the hairs, or setae, which give sensory feedback. The hairs are ancient arthropod traits, used for detecting airflow, vibrations, chemical cues, and touch. In spiders, these became highly refined. They detect vibrations in silk threads and through slit sensilla sense mechanical strain in exoskeletons, that is, their prey. The hairs allow the spiders to detect tension, movement, and prey on their silk threads, and without these precise sensory inputs, the spider couldn't maintain a functional web or know where prey is trapped within it, as it has poor eyesight. With it, however, it can sense the entire structure of the web just by plucking at it. Hairs transformed silk from a passive material into an active, responsive tool. The third trait would be leg hydraulics. That is, spiders don't have extensor muscles in some of their leg joints, relying only on hydraulic pressure, that is, fluid being pumped into the legs to extend them. This system originally allowed for stronger jumps, better climbing, and manipulation of prey, not to mention strength and bulk that insects are not really privy to. But its real secret use was in web construction, because it requires fine control and long reach. Hydraulic legs let spiders stretch silk threads across distances and position themselves precisely while spinning their intricate patterns. Hydraulic extension combined with muscular control allowed spiders to spin with consistent tension. Think being able to place a web at an exact amount of distance just by flexing. You can see this in action when they actually build the webs. See the easily repeated motion they display, specifically when they need to place the web at an intersectional point. Now, let's talk about honeybee colony dynamics and their advanced memorization. Now we're getting into behaviors that it seems almost impossible are not a sign of some deeper intelligence. And they are in a way, but let's look at these things of which honeybees are proven to be capable of and dissect them to see if they're truly instinct or intelligence. Honeybees can remember the color and scent of flowers and repeatedly return to the most rewarding ones. They navigate complex environments and use landmarks to find their hives with remarkable accuracy. They can understand concepts like same and different when trained with colored patterns, and can perform social behaviors, specifically waggle dances, to inform nestmates about the location and quality of food sources. They can anticipate when specific flowers produce nectar and visit them at the correct time of day. And lastly, their problem solving has shown that they're capable of solving mazes, pushing and pulling on ropes to collect food, copy other bees, and solve slightly different problems using rules learned from earlier problems. Now, this is all very impressive for such a small brain, and it shows very advanced learning and memory for a brain of this size. But the key difference between this being general cognition and more like a mechanistic decision tree of intelligence is the actual behaviors that are displayed by the bee. Although the bee has unlocked the cognitive power of relational context, it lacks any form of inventiveness. The bees can solve mazes based on remembering where they've been, but they would not be able to figure out how to rotate a knob to obtain a meal, as rotating things is not an instinctive or learned behavior in their particular range of known possible actions. The bee brains have advanced memory and can apply what they've learned to specific goals, but those goals and the actions they can take to accomplish them are limited by instinct. They do not satisfy the criteria for general intelligence, that is, the ability to hone your cognition into creating novel, creative solutions, which animals, even such as pigeons and perhaps some lizards, are capable of. This is because they are an active product of their environment rather than an active response to it. A generally intelligent brain can shape its environment, just as its environment shapes it, whereas a specialized brain is more of just a logically consistent response to the environment, perhaps formulated through context, but not built on it. This is why it's not just the learning, but the interpretation that matters with mammals, birds, and some reptiles and fish. Many vertebrates dream because of this, because dreams are a consolidation and a manipulation of information that's actively being shaped as part of an animal's general consciousness. And it's what makes consciousness separate from that of a machine. AI programs do not dream and interact with the world similarly to how insects do. And that's not the only piece of evidence, but it is interesting to think about how information can actually shape an individual. But now, let's look at maybe the one arthropod that doesn't perfectly map to this hypothesis: the jumping spider. First, jumping spiders have extraordinary senses. Their eyes are developed from ocelli, not ommatidia, meaning they are not compound eyes, and are actually somewhat more similar to ours. They are unable to move them in their sockets, but they are capable of depth perception, which most insects are not capable of. So visually, the jumping spider is incredibly gifted for an arthropod. It's how they use this enhanced sense which is truly impressive. Jumping spiders are excellent planners, using terrain, silk, flexibility, maneuverability to stalk and ambush prey. The extent to which they can plan ahead in this effort is astonishing. They can improvise if the prey suddenly changes position, and they can also stop and reanalyze if the route they are currently pursuing is in fact the most tactical. They exhibit delayed, goal-oriented gratification. For example, if a prey item is sitting on a leaf, maybe just out of jumping distance, the spider can reevaluate, and instead of trying its luck by jumping at the prey immediately, it could crawl up above the insect and descend down quietly for a silk ambush. All this being said, even though the jumping spider perhaps shows the most cognitive flexibility and ability of any arthropod, flexibility alone does not constitute general intelligence. A jumping spider can take in input and output complex behavior, and is even pre-programmed to process the optimal path to its desired goal, but the input it receives does not and cannot change the underlying shape into novel programming. The input it receives does not create abstract output, that is, behaviors that the spider was not already born with. It shows that even at their most complicated, no arthropod has shown that it has an intelligence beyond rote mechanized behaviors, no matter how superficially intelligent they may seem. Thanks for watching this episode of Privileged Bug Facts. Stay tuned for more bug content just like this. Thanks.